I stood across the conference table, staring down at the crisp HR document in my hands. Delilah was reading from it, her voice steady but cold. "Effective immediately," she said, her words like a sentence of doom. "You are relieved of all operational duties at McAllister Industries. A transitional exit package will be processed through legal." The words hung in the air, incomprehensible, surreal. This was my sister, my own blood, firing me. Less than 24 hours after I'd been named CEO of our family business. "Is this a joke?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended, barely above a whisper. Delilah didn't answer. Instead, she slid the document toward me and turned to the next person in the room. Adam West. Adam had been with the company for over a decade, a man I had grown to respect. Yet now, he sat across from me, as detached as anyone could be in this moment, almost as though he was waiting for his turn to sign something. "You're offering him a raise," I said, stunned. "Why?" "He doesn't need it. He's essential to the new structure," Delilah cut in. "This is about evolution, not nostalgia." I wanted to scream, to call her out, but I couldn't. Instead, I turned to Adam, my mind a mess of disbelief. "What about everything we've built? The foundation? You don't just dismantle everything because of some ... I couldn't finish the sentence, unable to find the words that could explain how deeply wrong this felt. Adam didn't argue, though. He just took the envelope from Delilah and signed it. No emotion, no resistance. And with that, she was one step closer to gutting our family's legacy. I looked at the others in the room, hoping for some solidarity, some sign that they knew how wrong this was, but they all just sat there, silently complicit. It was as if my entire life had led up to this one moment, the moment I realized that all the sacrifices, the late nights, the years I spent making McAllister Industries, what it was, none of it mattered. The silence was deafening as Delilah adjusted her blazer, gathered her papers, and turned to leave. "I'll see you all in the morning," she said, and just like that, she was gone. No apology. No explanation. I turned to Adam. "Are you okay?" I asked. I didn't know if I was asking him or myself. Adam hesitated before handing me a folded sticky note. "Read it later," he said, his voice cracking for the first time in a long time. I took the note, but before I could speak, he grabbed his bag and walked out, leaving me alone in the room. I waited for what felt like an eternity before finally unfolding the sticky note. The handwriting was rushed but unmistakable. It was from Adam. His message was simple, but it felt like a punch to the gut. "If you're not here, it's not McAllister anymore." And just like that, I realized the truth. I wasn't just being fired. I wasn't just being pushed out of a job. I was being erased from a legacy. A legacy we both helped build. And I hadn't even seen it coming. The shock lingered long after Delilah's exit. I sat there in the conference room, staring at the walls, at the empty chairs, at the spot where my sister had just been. The weight of what had just happened was too much to grasp. Was it real? Was I dreaming? This couldn't be happening, not after everything I had given to McAllister Industries. But the truth was clear. My own sister had orchestrated this. She had planned my ousting long before it became a reality. And now, it wasn't just about a job, it was about legacy, betrayal, and control. I left the room, but my mind remained trapped in the moments of that meeting, echoing with every word Delilah had said. I'd worked my entire life for this moment, for this company, only to be tossed aside as if none of it mattered. The pain was unbearable, but it wasn't the sting of the firing itself, which was the realization that my sister had been working behind my back for months, planning her rise, carefully and methodically. It wasn't the first time I had sacrificed for McAllister. It wasn't the first time I had given everything, but this time, it felt different. It felt final. I didn't go to the elevator. I couldn't. I took the stairs instead, each step heavier than the last. I passed by the offices of people I had hired, mentored, fought to protect, but none of them met my eyes. Not a single person even acknowledged my existence. Delilah had made sure of that. She was the new CEO now. To acknowledge me, to recognize the history that came before her, was a risk. It was easier to pretend I was nothing more than a shadow, just like she wanted. At the back entrance, Elise stood, arms crossed, her jaw tight. She didn't speak, but she didn't have to. She handed me a yellow sticky note, folded in half, before nodding at me, as if she knew what I had done for this company. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing in the hallway. I stood in the quiet of the hallway, unable to open the note right away. I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for more. But when I was finally alone in the parking garage, I unfolded it. Elise's handwriting was neat, familiar. "They're not worth your silence." I sat there, my hands gripping the note tightly. I wasn't just being betrayed by Delilah, I was being erased. The company, my family, my history, it was all slipping away, piece by piece. But Elise, she had left me a weapon. She hadn't just walked away from McAllister Industries. She had walked away from Delilah's lies, and in doing so, she had given me the truth. I wasn't finished. I wasn't defeated. As I sat there, staring at the building that had once been my life's work, my mind began to shift. I had always tried to stay humble, to not make waves, to be the steady hand behind the scenes. But I was done with that. It was time to fight back, not just for my place in the company, but for everything that Delilah was about to destroy. That night, after staring at the note for what felt like hours, I opened my email to sort through old documents, trying to clear out the remnants of my former life at McAllister. But it was then that I stumbled upon the folder hidden in the archived legal shared drive. It was marked Succession Strategy. I opened it, my hands trembling as I scanned through meeting transcripts, strategy drafts, and memos with board members, dated months before our father's death. I blinked, bile rising in my throat. Delilah hadn't just stepped into the CEO position when our father passed. She had been laying the groundwork for it long before his diagnosis, while he was still fighting for his life. This wasn't a seat that she had inherited. It was a throne she had taken. She had planned this discreetly, carefully, and now I was the casualty. The betrayal didn't start in that boardroom. Not when she fired me. No, it had started the day she decided she could take everything from me, our family legacy, the company, everything I had worked so hard for, while pretending that she didn't even notice. It wasn't just the documents. It wasn't just the betrayal, the coldness, the manipulation. It was the realization that I had been nothing more than a pawn in Delilah's grand game. She had crafted this narrative, and I was an obstacle she had swept aside. It hurt, but it also fueled something inside me, a fire that had long been dormant. I couldn't just let this go. I couldn't let her get away with this, not when she had taken everything I had worked for, every ounce of effort I had poured into McAllister, and not when she was willing to tear apart everything our father had built, everything our family had stood for, just to secure her own legacy. The following morning, I didn't take the elevator. I didn't need to. I walked through the front doors of McAllister Industries with a new sense of clarity. I wasn't the daughter who had been sidelined. I wasn't the sister who had been betrayed. I was the one who held the power now. As I entered the building, I couldn't help but feel a sense of finality in the air, like everything had been building toward this moment. I had no illusions about what had happened in that boardroom. Delilah's exit had been planned from the moment she began her quiet but now, I was the one who held the cards. I went straight to my office, the one that had once belonged to my father, the one that Delilah had redesigned to suit her image. As I sat down at the desk, I felt something strange wash over me. It wasn't the joy of victory or the relief of being vindicated. It was the certainty that I had made the right choice, that this was the moment I had waited for. The time to rebuild McAllister Industries had arrived, and it was mine to define. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings, phone calls, and endless paperwork. The board members were on edge, uncertain of how to proceed now that Delilah was gone. Some of them had been loyal to her, others hadn't, but they all knew one thing: McAllister needed stability, not chaos. I called in the department heads for a meeting. When they gathered in the conference room, I stood at the head of the table, my eyes meeting each one in turn. They were all waiting for me to speak, but I wasn't interested in speeches or grand gestures. I wanted results. "We're not chasing flash anymore," I said, my voice steady and calm. "We're going back to fundamentals. Integrity, reliability, and accountability. No gimmicks, no shortcuts." The room fell into a silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a silence of agreement, of understanding. They were tired of the uncertainty, tired of the games. They wanted real leadership, and I was ready to give it to them. Within days, the changes started to take effect. I dismantled the shadow task forces that Delilah had built. I reinstated key mid-level managers who had been quietly sidelined. Elise was brought back, this time as senior advisor of legacy operations. When I offered her the role, she cried. She hadn't expected it. None of us had expected it to come to this, but we all knew it had to happen. Our first major victory came when Everline Logistics A partner we had nearly lost under Delilah's leadership requested a renegotiation. They had been ready to pull out, but now, they wanted a 10-year commitment. "We trust you, Holland," their CEO said. "You're the reason we signed with McAllister in the first place." It was a small win, but it was a sign. A sign that McAllister could still thrive. A sign that we could still rebuild. But as the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite finished. There was still something lingering in the back of my mind. Something I hadn't fully addressed. And then, it happened. I found a knock on my office door, late one afternoon. It was Jaime, one of the youngest analysts in the company. He looked nervous, as though he wasn't sure if he should even be here. "Can I talk to you off the record?" he asked. I closed my laptop and nodded. "Of course." Jaime sat down across from me, his hands fidgeting with the edge of his jacket. He looked at the floor for a moment, gathering his thoughts before speaking. "About a month ago, Delilah offered me a promotion," he said, his voice quiet. "Director level, double my salary. But there was a catch. She wanted me to keep an eye on the old guard. She wanted me to report on who was still loyal to the past." My heart sank. I knew where this was going. "Did you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Jaime shook his head quickly. "No, but I recorded our conversations just in case. I didn't trust her. I knew something wasn't right." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small USB drive, setting it on the desk between us. "You should have this," he said, his voice steady now. "I don't want anything in return. I just, I want to work for someone who doesn't treat loyalty like a threat." I stared at him, my mind racing. This was the key. This was the evidence I needed to fully expose Delilah for what she had done. Jaime had given me a weapon, one that would bring everything to light. I wasn't just fighting for my position anymore. I wasn't just fighting for McAllister. I was fighting for the truth. The truth that Delilah had never cared about the company, about the legacy, about the people. She only cared about herself. The following week, I walked into the boardroom with everything I needed. I wasn't there as a sister. I wasn't there as a daughter. I was there as the legal majority shareholder of McAllister Industries. I had one goal: to expose the truth, to ensure that the company we had all worked so hard to build would survive, and that Delilah would face the consequences of her actions. The boardroom was tense as I laid the documents in front of them. The silence stretched out for what felt like an eternity. When I finished, I stood up, my hands steady on the table, and looked at Delilah. "This isn't just personal," I said, my voice calm but unwavering. "This is about the future of McAllister. And if you,